Holy watts, there's a Tesla battery module installed in that RV. Welcome back everyone, I'm Tom and you are watching our Phase 2 solar installation video. This is part of a series where we're walking you through the solar installation that we did on our RV, and we've done it in 3 phases. In phase 1, we installed solar panels on the roof and connected them to our existing 12-volt batteries in our RV. We did a video on that already, so be sure to go over and take a look at that because we covered things that we're not going to cover in this video, which is phase 2. In phase 2, we scrapped the old 12-volt batteries and we replaced them with a 24-volt Tesla lithium-ion module. We also installed all the electronics and converted the RV to work off of that 24-volt battery. We'll be showing you all that in a minute. In phase 3, I'm going to show you how we connect our inverter and power all the residential outlets in our RV so we can have 120 volt AC power whenever we need it. So today I'm going to walk you through the installation of our battery. How about we take a look? So we are up at the front of our fifth wheel in our storage compartment here, and this wooden box that you see right here houses our Tesla battery module. The original location for the batteries in this RV were in this compartment right here, and they're no longer there. It houses the electronics that control this battery, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. Before we get into the details, I did draw up a schematic of what we're going to be going over today. It may look pretty complicated initially, but by the end of this video, hopefully it'll all make sense. This schematic will be available for you to download over on our Morton's on the Move website on the blog associated with this video. Before we get into this install in any more detail, I want to make a disclaimer that this is a pretty technical install. This is not really for the average RVer that is not comfortable with working with electricity or these types of components. Nonetheless, if you learn to understand the systems, you can safely install something like this. So how about I get some of this stuff out of here so we could take a look at this battery. So we're going to start out by talking about the battery itself, which in this diagram is right here, the big Tesla battery module. That is the first thing that I actually installed when I was working towards the phase 2 installation. I chose to put the battery in this location here in our storage compartment because I didn't have enough room in our existing battery compartment, and the battery does not really require any maintenance whatsoever on it, so it can be boxed in, and as long as it's in a safe configuration and it's not going to get bumped, hence the box that we built here, it's okay to pretty much be just about anywhere. All I did was build a box of the appropriate size to house the battery, and it's built out of a 1/4 inch plywood. On the outside of the box here, you see the cell meter and monitor, and this is how we actually balance the battery and check the cell balance of the Tesla module. I'm not going to get into the actual details of the Tesla module because the previous video we talk a whole bunch about that, so be sure to head over there to take a look at that and learn more about this battery specifically. In this compartment as well, we also have our charge controller and our solar disconnect. And again, this we covered in the phase 1 of the solar system. Originally, we had it hooked up to our 12-volt battery system, but this charge controller can power either a 12 or 24-volt system, so converting over wasn't really any problem. It just had to change some settings inside the charge controller. So how about I open this up and we take a look at the battery itself. So I just pulled the front cover off the battery, and what you initially see in here, this black pad, is actually how we heat the battery. Back in that previous battery video where we talk about the Tesla battery, lithium-ion batteries cannot be charged below freezing. So we actually have a method to warm the battery if the battery gets too cold. In our diagram here, the battery heating pad is listed, and you see it goes off to a thermostat. We'll talk about that a bit later. Pulling this heating pad out, this is really nothing special. This is actually intended to heat a desk mat for heating like under your keyboard and stuff. I've seen others use like a pet heating mat or even a heating blanket to do this, but this was a 24-volt module. You can run it on either about 60 watts or 30 watts of power with this switch right here. We've found that even just 30 watts of heating power, it heats the bottom half of this pad, and it doesn't get super hot. It just gets warm, and we can bring the battery up to maybe about 70 degrees max with this pad, but that is more than adequate. I'm just going to go ahead and remove this pad here temporarily so we can take a look at the battery installed in here. I mounted the battery in the upright configuration because it has nice solid rails on either side, and it really seems to be very well situated to be installed in a vertical position. When I built the box, I put slits in there and I added these big Velcro straps that wrap around the battery and hold it nice and firm in there so it's not going anywhere. Also in this compartment, you see that we have the battery monitor wire that comes out, and I just cut a little hole in the actual cover here so that it can easily come out and hook up to our battery cell monitor. And then we also have our actual terminals, the positive and negative, that are on either end of the battery. They connect up and head over to the other compartment before powering the rest of the RV. And then on the back side of the battery here, I've actually got temperature sensors that monitor the battery's temperature, and they are actually installed underneath the plastic cover of the battery on the back side, monitoring the actual temperature of the back side of the battery. I chose to do that on the back side so that this could heat the battery all the way through, and we could get a pretty accurate temperature of the coldest part of the battery, which would be the back side, away from the heating module. Those batteries thermostats are kind of difficult to show you without completely removing the battery, which I don't want to do, but the wires are right here, and on the diagram they show up as this little X that attached to the battery. I did all the primary 24-volt power wiring for this system with 1/0 gauge wire, and that's the two wires here. They come out, I drilled holes in the back of this box, and they cross over into our electronics cabinet next door. I'm sure you're curious as to how this battery actually performs in the RV, and I'm not gonna go over that right now. We will go over that in a later video, but I will hint and say, wow. There are so many reasons we chose to use a lithium ion, particularly the Tesla battery in this. Again, a lot of those benefits are explained over in the Tesla battery video, but primarily this is a really small size. It only weighs 55 pounds, but it replaces the need for about 400 to 500 pounds of lead acid that would take up pretty much this entire space in here. So it's incredible how small and compact, and it's also maintenance free. All right, we're gonna take a short break. When we come back, we're gonna head over to the electronics cabinet and take a look at how this battery is connected to everything over there and how we are managing this lithium ion battery to safely install it in our RV. All right, so now we're really getting into the meat and potatoes of how this system actually works, the electronics. So the second part of how I actually installed this battery was I went ahead and I removed the existing lead acid batteries that were in this compartment. We had two 6-volt batteries wired in series to provide 12 volts for the system. They were installed on a sliding tray that I could pull out from in here. I went ahead and removed the batteries, removed the sliding tray, and you see that this is all lined in plywood now. I went ahead and I cut plywood and I lined it and spaced it off of the metal walls in here so I could install all of my electronics that I needed in this compartment. After I cut all the plywood walls and got them installed in here, I started to install the components one by one in their location, and actually deciding where they went was kind of difficult because you got to envision where the wires are going to be going and try to keep it as clean and easy to work on as possible. This compartment was ventilated for those lead acid batteries. It had to be ventilated. I no longer wanted it ventilated, so I actually filled both vents with foam here and here. And now this compartment is dedicated for the electronics that control that battery and provide power for the RV. So the first thing we're going to take a look at on our wiring diagram here is the power coming out of the battery. We're going to take a look and follow the positive side of the battery first. The first thing the power flows through is a fuse. The positive runs down through here and flows through our main fuse, which is currently fused at 150 amps. This fuse protects the system from a short or an overcurrent situation. The battery can actually safely put out up to 233 amps without any cooling, but we don't need that much power. The 150 amps will get us about 3,000 watts off the system, which is what our inverter is rated at and about what we're going to pull max. The next piece of equipment in the positive line is this blue thing right here. This is the Victron battery protection module. This unit is very important because what it does is it prevents the battery from being over discharged. Lithium ion batteries, unlike lead acid batteries, that if you accidentally leave a light on for a week in the RV and the battery completely dies, if you were to do that with a lithium ion battery, you would completely destroy the battery. So you need some means to shut the battery down when the voltage gets too low. This unit is intended to be used with lead acid or lithium. It's not good to completely kill a lead acid battery either, but at least it is somewhat rescuable with minimal damage. What this module is set to do is when the battery voltage reaches 19 volts for more than a couple minutes, it will disconnect the battery from the RV, preventing it from over discharging. This has electronics in it that are constantly monitoring the system, and this is a solid state relay, and it draws almost no power. It's an incredibly low power draw to actually switch. This module also has short circuit monitoring. It won't allow the load to be connected if there is a short circuit, so it has some current monitoring. And it also has overvoltage protection, but that's really not going to be very beneficial because the overvoltage is designed for lead acid batteries and it's much higher than we need for our situation. And it also only works in one direction. It can only block the flow in this direction. So if we're charging the battery from the system, this will actually still allow the battery to be charged. It just won't allow it to be discharged if the voltage is too low. So it will not prevent overcharging the battery. On the circuit diagram, it shows there is a manual battery disconnect. I actually don't have that wired yet. It's this little wire right here. If I were to pull this out, I would disconnect the RV from the battery. I am using this as my primary battery disconnect right now, but I am realizing that I would like to have an additional battery disconnect that I'm probably going to put over in the wooden box that the battery is installed in. After this module, the positive cable runs over to my primary 24 volt DC bus bar. On this bus, there are only a couple other things connected. First is the solar system, and the second is the 24 volt to 12 volt converter. Let's talk about the solar first. The MPPT charge controller that you saw in the other cabinet, we talk about that in our phase 1 video. The power comes off of that and comes into this cabinet, and the positive first runs down and lands on our 80 amp solar fuse. This is the primary fuse that protects from overcurrent or shorting the solar system. And while this is probably unlikely to ever actually burn out, it's always good to have a fuse in the system to protect the lines and the charge controller. This is the positive side from the solar. After it passes through the solar fuse, it runs into another one of these little blue boxes, which is another battery protect module. You see that this one is considerably smaller. This is a 65 amp version, I believe. And what this unit does is it also has under and over voltage protection, but we're not using it for that at all. We're actually using this to shut off the solar in case the battery is too cold or the battery voltage gets too high. If a setting accidentally gets changed in the solar charge controller or something, we can very easily overcharge this battery. And just like a lithium battery being undercharged, overcharged is just as bad, actually dangerous, likely to possibly cause a fire. Because that is so easy to do in the charge controller with a simple change of a setting, we need to be able to shut that off somehow. So that is what these electronics that you see on this side are doing. These two wires wired into this battery protect are actually a remote disconnect, and if we open this circuit, this battery protect will shut off. If the primary large 220 amp battery protect would prevent current from flowing both directions, we wouldn't need to use this one, but because it only prevents flow in one direction, and same with this one, I needed to use a second battery protect to prevent flow into the battery from the solar charge controller if the battery gets too low or too high. So what I've done is I built a little control circuit here off of the remote control for this battery protect. The wires run over here and go through two relay modules. The first relay module is monitoring the voltage of the battery, and it is monitoring for overvoltage and undervoltage conditions. The second relay that is in the protection circuit is the battery temperature monitoring relay, and this has a sensor that runs over to the battery and monitors the battery temperature constantly. Currently I have this set at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. If the battery temperature ever goes below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, this will disconnect the solar charging system automatically and prevent from charging the battery if it is too cold accidentally. Because the solar system is the primary means that we're charging this battery all the time, we need to have these automated systems in place so that if we're not monitoring it and something goes wrong, this will automatically take the battery offline from the charging and prevent damage. While we're over here taking a look at the electronics and controls, you will notice there is one more box up here, and it is labeled battery heater. There is a switch here. When I turn it on, you'll see it will light up. And what this is controlling that battery heating pad that I showed you over in the battery box itself. This is the thermostat that actually monitors the temperature as well of the battery. And if the temperature gets below, I think I've got it set at around 60 degrees, it will kick that heating pad on and bring it back up to about 65, 66 degrees. If we're in freezing weather, we can just click this on and that battery pad is going to maintain the temperature of the battery, keep it warm, and we're not going to have to worry about it potentially getting too cold and not being able to charge. Back to the solar system, after it comes through the solar charger shutoff and my relay control circuit, the power flows into the 24 volt positive bus bar as well. The other cable coming off of the 24 volt bus bar run off to our inverter, and we'll talk about that in our phase 3 video. All right, so we just walked through the positive line to the 24 volt bus, and we also took a look at the relays in the battery charge protection circuit that are highlighted in the circuit diagram as shown. Let's now take a look at the negative side over to the negative 24 volt bus. Basically, there's not a lot to it. The power comes in through this hole here, flows to this 500 amp shunt that all of the power has to flow through, and that is connected to our battery monitor inside the RV. We talked a bit about the battery monitor in our phase 1 video. There isn't really a whole lot different with that for this install yet, aside from we had to change a few of the settings and it's now reading 24 volts-ish instead of 12 volts. At a later date, I'll do a video specifically about what settings you can use with those. There's a number of different things to consider. The lithium-ion batteries are considerably different in their charging characteristics, so battery monitors that are designed for lead acid aren't going to work very well for lithium, so you do have to change a few of the parameters to get an accurate measurement of how much power there is in the battery and how much you're using. In our case, on the back side of the shunt, you see that we have this power cable coming in. This is the negative from our solar system, our MPPT charge controller. We connected it here because, well, I was kind of lazy and instead of building a whole new power lead, I just used the existing lead and it wouldn't reach to our negative bus bar. So I connected it here. It's all the same potential. So this works really well and it's still flowing into the battery through the shunt. Everything needs to flow through the shunt so that you can appropriately monitor the current in and out of the battery. After the negative comes off the backside of the shunt, it flows over and connects to our negative bus bar. Now, while we have 24 volts between the two primary bus bars that are handling most of the power, this is actually just at ground potential for the RV as it is connected to the frame of the RV via this white wire here. The green wire here is the other 24 volt wire running to the 24 volt to 12 volt converter. So we had a lot of questions of how we were going to actually convert the RV to run on 24 volts. Well, we didn't actually convert anything in the RV. We just put in this Orion 40 amp 24 volt to 12 volt converter in place here and then connected the 12 volt side of the RV to this. We're not using a whole lot of 12 volt loads in the RV. It's primarily our lighting circuits, the fridge runs on it, the water pump, things like that, and 40 amps was more than adequate for our needs. This is a simple electronic buck boost converter. It does have a little fan in it in case it gets hot. It runs about 98% efficient, so there is some efficiency loss in doing this, but in monitoring the system, it's not even noticeable when you don't have a whole lot of load. And when you're running a big load, 100-watt load, you might be losing 1 or 2 watts. It's really, really insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And the lithium-ion battery in general, I've actually seen a higher efficiency in the system than I was with a 12-volt system originally. The one big drawback to this system is that if this ever failed for some reason, we would not have 12 volts, or at least not via the battery at all. We could jumper this. I have a jumper pack and I could provide emergency 12-volt power to the bus. After the 12 volts comes off of this, it runs to a positive bus and then into a little 50-amp breaker that was originally in the system before entering the RV. And I could easily connect a 12-volt battery up to this for a temporary solution, but this is the primary means of power, and if this were ever to fail, we definitely would end up in a bit of a pickle. The beauty of this, however, is that it provides a constant 13.2 volts to the RV all the time, no matter what the voltage of our Tesla battery is. Electronics love steady voltage. We've had some LED lights that have definitely flaked out when we were running the higher absorption voltages for the lead acid batteries, the 14 volts or higher. And even when the battery got really low, if you accidentally drained it too low, that voltage swing from charging and discharging the battery is very hard on electronics. So using this and maintaining that 13.2 volts, no matter what the 24-volt side is doing, is a lot easier on the electronics inside the RV. In our circuit, I tried to keep everything that was 24 volts isolated, and I dashed lines around things that were separate. The solar charge controller is separate. It runs at a separate voltage. And then the 12-volt side is separate as well. The 12 to 24-volt converter is pretty straightforward, but we had to add this battery because the 12 to 24-volt converter was not powerful enough to provide the 100 to 120 amps or so that our hydraulic system, which sits just above this compartment, was required to operate our landing gear in our RV and our slides. We also need a dedicated 12-volt power that can operate the emergency brakes in case the trailer disconnected from the truck for some reason. Because I needed those currents, I could put a really big converter in place, but the simplest option was to actually put a little lead acid battery, a sealed lead acid battery, so I don't have to vent this compartment, in here that was able to provide those currents. We only use this battery to power the hydraulic system and the emergency breakaway brake system in the RV. The wires running to the battery are one that goes to the truck, and the battery is primarily charged from the truck when we're driving. We use so little power from it that seems to be enough for us, but if I ever needed to, I could easily jump this battery, or I could actually charge it off of the battery converter here as well. And then the other side just runs to the ground in the RV and up to the hydraulic system as well. So what you can actually see here is that this ground it's just ground. It's not 24 volts, it's not 12 volts, it's just ground potential, because both the 12-volt side and the 24-volt side are both connected to the same ground potential. So that's it. That's how we've got our battery connected to our RV. We've had a few bumps along the way figuring out how this system works, but for the most part, we've been operating this on a couple months, and it's been working really well. Thinking about how I designed this and did this, I would probably do the battery protection a little bit different. I probably would use one probably mechanical relay, which draws more power, but by using a mechanical relay, I wouldn't have to have two separate relays because it would shut off power in both directions, into the battery and out. Since I didn't do it that way though, I'm not exactly sure if it would draw more power, if it would be the right way or not, but this is working pretty well, and the solid state relays should last the life of this system. So that wraps up our phase 2 installation, how we hook the battery up. In phase 3, I'll be covering how we hook up our hybrid inverter, how we hook it up to our 120 volt system, and how that works combining grid or generator power with the solar system. Be sure to check out the detailed video about the battery and also our phase 1 video, and we will see you next time for phase 3. Thanks for watching. Bye.